There's some Revelator songs that I'm like, man, we got to bring those back. But we've done so many songs and albums. There's like so much to choose from that I guess we don't think about it all the time.
We need to get you a really good slide player in Nashville, and you guys need to cover a Derek Trucks song.
You know, he told me Susan wrote the song, which he was proud of. He said that with great pride, you know, the way you say nice things about your family.
From the first note with Tedeschi Trucks, they just blow you away.
Yes, we will. I wouldn't argue with anyone that says that could be my favorite song on I Am the Moon.
He, signs my ticket, and I look over at Susan. I say, Susan, would you sign it too? And she goes, oh, heck yeah.
Kevin calls me and was like, hey, man, what are you doing? I was like, nothing. He was like, Derek wants to record some tuba stuff. I said, when do you want to do it? And he was like, let's do it Wednesday.
It was midnight Harlem. And it caught our attention, man. And we started diving deep, and we're like, okay, we got to see these guys.
Sup? Welcome to the unofficial Tedeschi Trucks podcast. This is episode number 136, and I am Adam Choit. To follow this show, it's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. On YouTube, just search Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. If you're watching, you are already there, so please be sure to subscribe, give the show likes, shares, comments. I definitely appreciate all of that. I am at Adam Choit on Twitter and Instagram if you'd like to follow me. And definitely please subscribe to to the show on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. It's, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those platforms, all the places. TedeschiTrucksPodcast.com is the website. Links to my link tree, which has all the links for everything related to this show. AdamChoit.com for all my personal stuff, social media, other projects. But for today's episode of this show, we have Rick from the Rock Talk Studio podcast, which is previewing, reviewing, and recommending rock and roll books, docs, and films. New episodes are the first Tuesday of every month. Rick himself grew up in Connecticut, but has been a longtime West Coaster, spending time in San Diego and Los Angeles. He's in San Diego now. He loves TTB and the Allman Brothers and Bob Dylan, and we of course talk about all of these acts. And we dig in also on Leon Russell and Bill Janovitz's new book, all about Leon, called The Master of Space and Time's Journey Through Rock and Roll History. And of course, we talk the TTB Leon connection, of course, to Susan and Derek directly and specifically. But let's just get started because we cover a lot. Here's Rick from Rock Talk Studio. Okay, so it's good to see you today, Rick from Rock Talk Studio. What's cooking, my friend?
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. It's great to be on the show. Like I said earlier, I admire your passion and what you do with this. Any Tedeschi Trucks fan should be tuned into this podcast. It's great. I just admire what you're up to here. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate that. How are you holding up during whatever year this is?
I'm good. It's been a good year. It's been my first year with the podcast, so it's been exciting. A lot of things are happening going into next year too. So it's been a learning experience, but it's such a great time.
Yeah, learning experience. I can certainly relate to that for sure. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate that, and for the support and listening and all that. That means a lot. And for being a fan of TTB, like just that alone is enough for me to pretty much like anyone. If you do, that's a pretty good head start. I get so excited when somebody knows the band and knows enough about their music to know that the band is awesome. Like, oh, right. I know that band. They're really good. I heard that, whatever. Because I don't expect everyone to know. And then sometimes I'll say like, oh, I'll explain the Derek Trucks history. I'm like, he played with the Allman Brothers, and then they'll recognize sometimes the Allman Brothers. But it is super exciting when somebody knows the band and shares your passions. But why don't we get into your journey and your background and musical journey is kind of what I ask for. Tell me about like where are you right now, and then tell me about where you grew up, and we'll get into early music memories, and I'll give you the floor.
All right. Cool. I was going to wrap it around my kind of Allman Brothers, TTB, how it kind of came to be. Right now I'm in San Diego. That's where I live, in San Diego. Been here for about 20 years. Like I mentioned earlier to you, I used to live in Los Angeles before that, but I grew up in Connecticut. That's where I was born and raised. And that was the first time I saw the Allman Brothers. And it was Springfield Civic Center in Massachusetts, 1980, with Dangerous Dan, with Dickie Betts as Dan Toller on guitar, then with Dickie. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles. So there was a gap of time, and the Allman Brothers were kind of, going back and forth. They were off for a little bit. So the next time I saw them was 91, and that was the first time I saw Derek. And that was during the time when the brothers would bring Derek out with his little baseball hat on, and he was still young, and he would just come out and rip. And I can still remember taking a look at my friend and being like, what is that? Who is that?
What year was this, did you say?
It was 91, the seven turns. Was that the Allman Brothers when they kind of got back together? That's when Woody and Warren were just joined the band. And it was Greek Theater, LA, and there he was, man. It's little Derek Trucks wailing away. I can't remember what they played. It's been so long, but that was the first time I actually saw him and realized, wow, that there's something with this kid at the time. So I was lucky enough at living in Los Angeles. I was working in the music industry, so I would have friends who worked at different labels, and anytime the brothers came to town, I always got a ticket because let's say the Blues Travelers were opening up for him. My friend at eand would slip me a ticket, so I was always in on getting to see the Allman Brothers, which was a nice ride there through the 90s. And then I moved to San Diego, like I said, where I live now. And I kind of got away a little bit from mainstream music at that time because I started a music blog down here called SD Rock and Roll that just focused on local music. So I was supporting and focusing on local bands and local venues, local organizations. And again, I kind of just fell away from mainstream stuff. I just was really focused on the local scene. And I was at a club, a venue. I can't remember what it was, a meeting for something about their upcoming schedule. And they said, do you want to stay tonight for the show? And I was like, sure. And I think it was like the first time I've ever been offered a ticket for a show and not knew who was playing. And it was Tedeschi Trucks. I mean, it was crazy. It was the Revelator tour right in 2011, I think.
Right. Sounds right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2011 outside at Humphreys. I don't know if you've ever been to Humphreys down here in San Diego. It's a great outdoor event, a venue right on the docks with like boats coming up. People like just take dinghies and just float them around and watch the show out on the water, like right next to the venue. It's an outdoor venue. And I was like, Susan Tedeschi? I mean, I saw her at like Jazz Fest, when she was just being a kick-ass blues artist. And I'm like, oh, I love her. And I'm like, I don't know how I missed that they formed a band. I just, like I said, I think it was just so focused on that local scene. But there they were in all their glory and the original band, and here I am back again, just addicted, just blown away by seeing the band. And then I was doing the local scene for a while, and then I started doing the podcast last year, the Rock Talk Studio podcast, where I review books and documentaries. And I just did a review of the new Leon Russell book. I'm gonna put it up here to give Bill some props here. Bill Janovitz. Great Leon Russell book, big Leon Russell book. It's a commitment, but there's a lot of great threads in this book that lead directly to Tedeschi Trucks and the connection there. And that's when I reached out to you and said, hey man, let's talk about the band and the book. There's some really cool stuff in there.
Oh, very cool. That's cool. I appreciate hearing your journey. I kind of want to unwrap and unpack a little of that, and I'm not even sure where to begin. I want to go back far, like almost at the beginning, but but I can't help but think of or at least wonder, because I'm not an Allman Brothers expert like yourself. It sounds
I
like
would say expert,
and Bob Beatty and Alan Paul and all these guys out there written books and
great
really
stuff.
know everything. Because Derek joined the band from an official standpoint in 99, right? 99 to 2014 was his official run with the Allman Brothers.
Right.
But he played as a guest, it sounds like, probably on and off with them from the early 90s to up until that point. So I guess I'm curious, how many shows did he actually do with the Allman Brothers in that time period? Was it like 25 or was it like
Right.
400?
Yeah,
Like,
we
I'm
need
not
to call
sure.
Alan Paul. Alan Paul will know, or Bob Beatty will know. Those guys, we need to get them on the line.
It probably wasn't like an insane amount of shows. It was probably more a here and there thing over the years because we probably would have heard the tapes and seen the video because there's just so many people hungry for footage and for audio. And I forget, and maybe we forget that like Derek and other people, like they have their own bands. You know what I mean? I always think of like, how come we don't see guests with so and so? Because it's like these people are like touring, like they're on with their own bands, which makes me I always think about how when you see guests play with Tedeschi Trucks Band, who either have played with them or haven't played with them in a while, and they sort of remember or realize how awesome Susan and Derek are, because Susan and Derek almost always tend to steal the show without even trying to steal the show. There's her voice and his guitar and her guitar too. Like it really does cut through, so you can see the reactions from a Trey Anastasio or these other guitar players when they see Susan and Derek and hear them. It's like, whoa. Whereas the hardcore fans like myself, and probably yourself and the people watching and listening to this podcast, not that we're spoiled or not constantly moved and surprised and on the edge of our seat when they perform, but we're less like I guess we are less surprised in that way, because we're expecting transcendent music, whereas like people who don't play with Derek and Susan hear them all the time or they have that little extra amount of surprise.
Absolutely. And it's cool to see people at that level be surprised too, because like I say,
they're
like
fans.
Trey, who's played with so many people, can still come out and be blown away by the power of her voice, or by standing next to Derek and you see sometimes they're looking down like, what is he up to, man? He's just going to another level, and just admiring that, standing right next to him playing is pretty cool.
Yeah, they're fans of music, and you could hear like the passion, and when you hear any of TTB members, and a lot of the musicians that they're connected with in their various circles that they play with, like when they speak about music, it's like with such a passion, and they listen as like as the fans do. They're fans. So you grew up in Connecticut, and you lived there all the way through high school age, college age?
Yep, high school age. Right after high school, I moved out to Los Angeles. I had a friend who was in the service, and he came back from the service on a weekend, calls me up on Monday and said, "Hey, I'm moving to California on Saturday. Are you with me?" And I was like, "What do you mean, man? I'm working at my job. You're out of high school." I'm like, "Dude, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. What do you mean Saturday?" And he's like, "Well, let's meet for a beer and talk it through." So Tuesday, calls me up again. He goes, "Hey man, I'm just going on Saturday. You with me?" And I'm like, I mean, this is too, my mom's going to kill me. And then on Thursday I made the decision, and then it's been history since. The best thing I ever did was move to California.
What about growing up, like even around the house, like early age, elementary school age? What kind of musical memories jump out at you? Was there music playing around the house, and were you a musician? Did you sing, play guitar, any of that stuff? Tell me more about like your early music,
Yeah, it was all my mom, man. My mom just had 45s and 8 tracks and records, always something going in the house. Like I remember early Kinks records we were playing, and early Steely Dan, and even back before that, kind of more of like the Frankie Valli kind of stuff that she was into in the 50s when she was a little bit younger. So I grew up on that kind of early rock and roll, and then like 60s, 70s rock. My first concert, I was 14. I went and saw Kiss. I love Kiss, which is kind of cool because they're doing their last show Saturday, I think.
How many years have they been doing their last show for?
Yeah, they've done a few last shows, but I'm sold that this one is it, though. I really think this is the last one. But so I started getting into music really early. 14 is pretty early, and became a huge Dylan fan at like 15. And I'm a huge Dylan fan. He's my number one. But Kiss was first one. Yes in the Round was the second one. The original Yes, all the original Yes members. ZZ Top, and then the Brothers was the fourth concert ever.
What year did you see ZZ Top?
That's like 79 at the Duello tour.
That was pretty awesome, I imagine. Like that, I would love to. I actually haven't had a chance to. Did I see Billy Gibbons. I think I saw Billy Gibbons as a guest in something somewhere,
Really?
but I don't think I've never seen ZZ Top live, and I would love to go
Oh,
back to like. That's why I need like a time machine, to be honest with you.
those were the good days. Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
that's what they call music. Like listening to music is it's like the closest thing to a time machine, I think, is what
Yeah.
whoever they is.
Right.
Right.
They got it. They nailed it on that one. Yeah. Billy Gibbons is my favorite all-time guitarist. I don't think he's the best guitarist, but he is my personal favorite guitarist of all time. Just that crunch and that sound he gets and those solos he does. No one plays like that. I mean, I admire, and like I said, Jeff Beck and Derek and Stevie Ray and Hendrix. I mean, Jimmy Page, I think are better, but just me personally, where it hits me personally, Billy Gibbons has been the guy for me all along. And I've seen him so many times. They're just so great.
I think that Jimi Hendrix said Billy Gibbons was his favorite guitar player. Is that did I make that up, or did I read that?
No, you nailed it. He did. Yeah, Billy Gibbons toured with them in real early stages, and Hendrix did come out and say it was his favorite guitarist. Yeah.
I was not that I'm anything spectacular on guitar, but like I was going through a hardcore ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons phase and I still, not that I'm out of that phase or anything, but I'm like, I want to work on the pinch harmonics, the squealies that he does.
He's tough to play, man. I play a little guitar myself, and I just can't catch a lot of the stuff that he does. He's tricky, man. He does a lot of sneaky stuff, and that sound is, yeah, it's real tough to get.
I spent a couple of years just trying to not emulate or do exactly like he does, because I can't do that, but just to like do something in the ballpark of like achieving that sound and achieving it when I want to, like, because it was just such a cool, unique, again, like a vocal quality. I think that's a lot of like what I'm drawn to, you know, is melody and vocal quality from in music, but especially in a guitar player and a lead guitar player. Like Billy Gibbons plays with such a vocal quality and his unique style. He plays slide too, of course.
He does play a little slide,
And Derek, of course, you know, has such a vocal quality to his playing, especially his slide guitar, but totally different. Like if we're talking pinch harmonics versus slide, but BB too with his you know, just his vibrato. That's why he did it, right? Is to because he couldn't and didn't play slide, but wanted to
that sound.
Have that sound.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Did you play guitar as a kid?
I do, but just so I can play, you know, something for my wife or something. Just around the house, I'll play and just pick something up.
Chords and singing kind of thing, more than like, you know,
than solos.
Virtuoso.
Oh yeah, not nowhere near there. No.
You ever try slide guitar?
Just goofing around, but never like put some serious time to it. Just like one of my friends had one and we just passed it around, kind of thing.
It's interesting to talk to people from all different generations, and specifically Allman Brothers fans, to hear about when they discover the band or what eras that they're most familiar with. Because when I hear the Allman Brothers, I do think of the original lineup and conjure up images and sounds of Duane, but I have to catch myself and realize, oh, they might be talking about some other era, or like some other era might be there.
Absolutely.
Preeminent. Is that the right word?
Yeah. Right. They went through a lot of different incarnations, no doubt. I mean, Fillmore East was the first introduction to the band. You know, I had a friend who turned me on to Allman Brothers through Fillmore East, and that's why I went and saw the show, because I thought I was getting that. And then, you know, I realized, well, Duane's not here. You know, I was still, like I said, I was kind of young, so I didn't, and there was no internet, so there was still a lot of, you know, word of mouth kind of learning about the band. But that's where I was turned on to the band early on.
Very cool. What were your plans or thoughts when you did move to California? And I'm almost curious, like, about like the specific day you moved and like your mom's reaction.
Oh man, Adam, I could still see my mom in the rear view mirror as we're pulling away. I mean, that's just like one of those embedded things on you. I could just see her crying as we pulled away, because, you know, I was fresh out of high school. I didn't know nothing. I think I had a couple $100 on me. That was it. And we had a little U-Haul, and my friend was a couple years older than me, so I was just leaning on him. He didn't know any better than I knew where we were going. We were just going until we saw the Hollywood sign. and we pretty much just went across the country. We're just bunch of dumbasses just having fun, listening to music, partying, having a good time until we saw the Hollywood sign.
So, but you weren't even thinking like in terms of like, career jobs or anything. Like what did you say he was a performer or an actor, musician, and you were you weren't even getting to writing journals or anything like this?
No, he was in the service in the Army, and he came out of the Army. And I remember I was working at a plastic warehouse selling plastic for my stepfather, just do something out of high school other than just get in trouble.
It's like the Graduate, The Graduate, where he
was he working in a plastics place?
Well, that's what the guy was trying to pitch him on it, like
really?
At the after graduation party. Come work for me. The future is plastics. I think he just said. I think just the word plastic, and it was like a famous line, plastic or something like that.
Right, exactly. And I used to work at a Strawberries Records and Tapes. And I remember telling one of the guys at the plastic factory, because he asked me, what am I going to do when I go to Hollywood? And I said, I'm going to work at a record store. I'm going to work like at Strawberries. He goes, people line up down the street to work at a record store in Los Angeles. You're never going to get a job working at a record store. First job I got, working at a record store. I was marched myself in to this chain of stores. I don't know if you remember. I think it was before you said you got there. It was called Music Plus. And right on Sunset and Vine, I got a job first day working there. And then I eventually managed that store. And that was the #1 store in the chain of Music Plus stores, 92 stores. So that was a great time in my life. I was in my 20s and I'm managing this #1 store, and just all the people that used to come in there, all the celebrities, all the concerts we would have there, and all the good times. Had a really good time with that chain of stores. And then I opened the first showcase store of that chain, was down on Fairfax, right next to the CBS building. I think CBS building's still there on Fairfax, right down the street from Cantor's. That was the first showcase store ever in Los Angeles before Virgin Records and everything came in. So I got very lucky to be able to come in and work at that record store, and then just kind of rise up and work at these really cool locations.
Yeah, it's super awesome. I'm trying to pull up pictures as we speak. Maybe I'll edit them Plus? In. Yeah, there's some pictures on the internet. Yeah, I mean, there is some. Obviously, I mean, it goes without saying there is a lot of cool music history in Los Angeles,
Oh, absolutely.
And so much great history. I mean, and I'm guessing me and you are partial to a lot of the music more from the past that came through this town versus maybe some of the stuff that comes around today. But it's just more that I prefer new music that sounds like old music. And there are a lot of great young artists out there, the Marcus Kings and the Quinn Sullivans and the Crystal Kingfishes and all these like guitar dudes. It's like the blues is in good hands. But I don't know how you can achieve anything better than Tedeschi Trucks Band. I'll use a word like, I have no problem on this podcast using a word like better. And I'm the last person I feel like who wants to compare, contrast art and artists and music and songs and all this stuff. But I am kind of partial, like, and it's to me like what that 12-piece band has put together and what they do and what they achieve, and that slide guitar and her voice, like I don't know how you match the power. It's just it's so powerful. No, I always say no one could follow them. I mean, it's you can't other than like you were gonna like talk about like a metal band or like a different genre. So that's a whole other thing. But in like the rock and roll blues,
no,
American music, popular music.
They're the tops. They're the tops out there now. I can't even think of a band that can come close in that genre for what they do and how they deliver it to. It's a special thing without a doubt, and just the passion they have. It just comes out of them. Susan singing. If you can't feel that, I don't know. She just has that way that when she just has that smile and when she opens up her mouth, that voice is just something else. And then, you put Derek in that too. Like you said, I don't think anybody can touch him right now.
They're so awesome. I've had this conversation a million times, but like it's still just so much fun and so exciting just to talk about them because they're that talented and the music is that moving. And
Yeah.
again, power is definitely a word I associate a lot with this band, especially with like the drummers, having two of them. And that's, you know, something that I talk about, like, because people wonder, like, why do they have two drummers? I'm like, do you hear how powerful that is?
Right.
Amongst like, obviously the communication. I'm just gonna go on all these rants about the band, but I do want to hear more about your like journey, because it sounds like you're always very passionate about music. You dabbled in playing, but you just loved it so much. And especially, like, were the Allman Brothers your favorite band? And you moved to California in 1970.
80s. It was 80s. Early 80s, 82, 83 ish.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the Allman Brothers, they were one of my favorites. Definitely. I was a huge Dylan fan.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So I was a huge outcast in my school because people did not get Dylan, and I just got him at an early age. My stepfather turned me on to him. Something happened when I heard his, Subterranean Homesick Blues, just those lyrics, and just trying to discover, like, what is he? And he just hit me in a certain way lyrically that no one else could. And it's funny, when I first started getting into him, he just went into his religious phase. And the first time I saw him in 1980, it was a religious concert. He was doing the religious music, and he didn't play any old songs at all. He just played his religious stuff, and he was kind of preaching. And I was not into that at all.
Was he preaching in between?
Yeah, in between songs.
Yeah, I guess I'm not super familiar, because, like, some people think, and I guess I think of it sometimes, it's like, oh, he's just going through his Christian phase, so he's just doing Christian rock, kind of, like, or whatever Dylan's version of that. But he's like full on, like, preaching and stuff.
He was, and I was not into that. But the band was powerful, and he was powerful, and that was the first time I was in his presence. So again, something happened to me there where I just was blown away by the fact that there he is, and he's right in front of me, and I'm 16, 17, wherever I was, and so it's been Dylan from that day. But Allman Brothers are definitely in, I would say, my top 5 of all-time favorite bands.
These are all the bands that we're going to talk about besides Tedeschi Trucks are pretty much their favorite, or right up there in terms of like bands and acts, when we're talking about Dylan and Leon Russell and the Allman Brothers in terms of influences too. And right there for me also, like, Dylan has always been someone who I've been pretty much into from probably a similar age to you, early college age, and even maybe a little earlier. Just, certain Dylan songs you always remember, even just like before you even knew who people no one realizes how many of the songs that he wrote that obviously everyone covered and made bigger hits, because they happened to be have more virtuosity with the vocals or their guitar work or whatever the case may be, or just more popularity in music. Like, and with whatever it might be hip in that time period or something. But so many great songs. Just thinking about, like, even before I maybe even got more hardcore going through his catalog, I remember, like, The Hurricane, like the song The Hurricane was like that was like from the movie, like, and like, it's like just so many Dylan memories before I even went through his catalog and fell in love with a lot of the even more recent stuff. And by recent stuff, I mean stuff that's old now. The early 21st century Dylan and late 90s stuff. There's just so much great stuff. And that might be my favorite era of Dylan, is like the what they call
Time Out of Mind.
Yeah, the what is when you have 3 albums, that it's a when you have 3 albums together, it's
like a trilogy.
Those
Time Out of Mind and Love and Theft and Modern Times.
Right, those are kind of a trilogy. And those are some of the most fun albums, diverse albums, and
big time.
But also to have a lot of traditional bluesy things to them.
He's a one of a kind, and I always just say, I just can't believe I'm alive while he's alive. I cannot believe that we have him still with us to this day. And we've been able to see this one of a kind guy. I think that, hundreds of years from now, people still will be looking back in awe for what he's done. No one lyrically has done what he's done. And just throughout his career, I mean, he's 82 now, and he's still out there. His last record, that Rough and Rowdy Ways, was a masterpiece in his 80s. That's incredible.
Right.
Incredible.
I should dive into that one, is what you're saying.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. It's deep and moody and dark, and it's you know, it's an 80-year-old's perspective on a lot of things, and he's just such a great writer, and he's just got this little attitude he's got now as he's older. Not that he didn't care earlier, because he always kind of marched to his own drum and did what he wanted, and that was one of the things I always admired about him. Like, he could shift around and reinvent himself almost every album, which is, you know, so hard to do, but he's still doing it in his 80s.
And he stays, it seems like, stays true to himself and authentic as well. And I think of, like, just the way you're describing this album and the latest incarnation of Dylan, so to speak, I think of George Carlin in a lot of ways as someone like the comedian, like great comedian.
That's interesting. Yeah, George Carlin,
who was somebody who stayed true to themselves, but also kind of evolved at the same time. And he was always someone who had a, let's just say, biting sense of humor is a gigantic understatement. But in his older age, he became even a little bit more biting,
right?
Especially like thinking about like his earlier hippie days, and you could say Dylan to make the same kind of journey, and they're roughly this. They probably would be roughly the same. Maybe they are roughly the same
age,
age and same
time period. Yeah, possibly.
Sure, but artistically, I can see a little bit of a similar, similar journey.
I like
even
that.
Some of the politics overlap and the activism as well. I'm sure they've rubbed shoulders over the years. I can only imagine.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a great book that just came out. They took a bunch of the archives out of the Dylan Center. That you know, the Dylan Center is presenting some of his archives, but they've got all this stuff that they haven't even gone through yet, that only certain scholars and certain people can get to. And this book just came out, 600 pages. There's a lot of great pictures in there. I'm trying to think if there was a picture of him with Carlin in there. I don't know. I remember seeing a picture of him with George Carlin.
Probably in Studio 54 or something like that. Maybe.
I don't know if Bob ever went to Studio 54. That would be a great.
Didn't they all went there? Everybody
Studio 54.
They all stopped by.
I've never heard of him going to Studio 54.
Maybe because that's what sent him into his Christian phase, was all the debauchery going on in that time period in New York City.
Exactly.
He was somewhere else. Oh, I forgot what I was going to ask. It's slipped my mind. So many things. I was going to ask something about Dylan. Oh man. Anyway, we lost it. But yeah, there's so much great music from him over the years. I would love to. I mean, this is more like fantasy world, but like I would love to interview him, and it wouldn't be like I would just want to talk to him about obviously Derek and Susan. Like, I mean, I because he's played shows with her, and I think he has probably played with. I don't know if he's
I don't know if he's ever played with Derek.
I know that's footage of him with Susan on stage on the YouTube.
Yeah, Highway 61 is like
right.
Famous footage they have of him and her. I think she's played with him a couple of times. I don't remember ever hearing anything about Derek playing. That'd be interesting, because he's pretty tied in. You know, when he does talk about music and modern day music, he keeps an eye on things. You know, he's got his own way of looking at things.
Yeah, I would love to hear him wax poetic on Derek and Susan. If I could get him to speak just for like 10 minutes on the podcast, be like, "Oh, tell me what you remember about Susan and Derek and your opinion of their band." Like whatever he knows and remembers, because he's probably like sick of talking about. He doesn't even do a lot of interviews, just because that's how you know he's sick of talking about insert whatever topic he's been asked a million times about. So this might be. I always think about, like, when I think about like if I'm gonna shoot way out of my league for an interview or something like that, I think about Alan Paul and how when he was telling me the story when he got Bruce Springsteen on the phone, and Bruce was enthusiastic about giving him some time because it was a conversation about Dion. For the tribute album, I think Bruce did a song on for Dion or something like. I forget the exact connection that made, but it was basically something for and about, you know, another musician that they found inspiring and admire and stuff like that. So that's just something I keep in mind. Yeah, it would be awesome to talk to Dylan and interesting to think about his career path and journey, and Susan and Derek, they play so many of his. So I did an episode about this. Really? I'm forgetting what I even have done. This was before I was even doing video. So this was must have been a year or two. Some who knows how long ago at this point. But I just went through all the songs that the Dylan songs that the band has done.
Oh, cool.
And
cool.
they've done like 5. They do like 5-10 Dylan songs. You know.
When I saw them when they were out here, Susan did a solo version of "Don't Think Twice." She just came out and just sang, and it was funny. She went into it and she forgot the first or second line of the songs, and she stopped. She started laughing, and everybody was just clapping. She's like, "I'm sorry, I forgot the word." She goes, "But I know him," and she did it. Picked it up again and just nailed it. So that was really cool. And then to hear her doing a Dylan song was like, extra bonus for me.
Do you do that song too on guitar for your wife?
It's a long one. It's a long song.
Is it that long? It's only 4. I do this. I like that song. I do that one. I forget the verses too, so Susan makes me feel less bad about it. But it's only 4 verses, but they're all kind of long verses.
Yeah.
But that's what makes them fun, because it's like it's not something that repeats other than the verses themselves repeating.
Yeah, it's a nice one. She does a nice version of it, definitely.
Where does he come up with these melodies or these chord progressions?
I think he pulls a lot of it from way back stuff. He's always been the kind of guy who just knew the old, like, traditional stuff, the Carter family stuff. He talks a lot about, Woody Guthrie, of course, but he had just this really a mind that could just memorize and be able to repeat stuff at an early age. I mean, he came out of nowhere in Minnesota and just went to New York, and all of a sudden, boom, he's writing Masters of War. He's writing Blown in the Wind. It's like, it was incredible what he did at an early age, and such an early, without really much behind him. He didn't like ramp up. It was like, here he is. And there he goes. It's pretty crazy.
What could TTB do with Masters of War?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. I could.
Yeah, that would be cool.
There's so many good ones that they could just go nuts on.
Hold on, I have to hear maybe a Mike vocal on that, or what would a Gabe vocal be on that? I think maybe Mike starts it, and then Susan comes in. I'm working it out. I'll let Derek handle the arrangement.
It's in good hands.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah.
I guess continue on your LA journey. I don't know where we were in your musical. We're jumping around, but that's all right.
Yeah. LA journey was, it was great because, it was weird because it was 80s, hair bands and stuff. And I just wasn't into it. I wasn't into Motley. I wasn't into Poison. I remember I saw Guns N' Roses before they were really Guns N' Roses. So I was more, I don't know, stuck into that traditional, I guess you call it classic rock. Now, I know that was such a bad word for a while, but now it's more of an honor, I think, to think that, the 60s through the 90s, what that was there, that piece of art, as I like to call it, the art form known as rock and roll. I think Little Steven's got a great way of saying it, how he looks at it. And I agree. It was a special time. And that was the music I was more into. So I was in the 80s in Hollywood, but I wasn't really into that Hollywood scene. And then I started, after I was working at the record stores, I started working for a couple independent record labels and branching out there with a little bit different style of music. I was running a distribution end of their rock division, and it was a vinyl reissue company. And we were doing records from Sonny Landreth. We did a record with Matthew Sweet, the band Cracker. So it's kind of opened me up to some different avenues. And that's when I started going to New Orleans. I had a friend who lived in New Orleans, and for 3 years in a row, I would go down to Jazz Fest every year. And at that time, and I don't know what it's like now. I know it's a lot more crowded now, but there was nothing better. I don't think I've experienced any better time musically than Jazz Fest in New Orleans. Have you ever been?
I have not. It's funny because I just did the volunteering for Kofi Berber's Day of Service, right. and a couple of people I think there were talking about Jazz Fest and going, and I know the Stones were just announced for next year. That's kind of a big deal. I have not been, but they always have high profile acts, be they jazz acts or not. They're definitely big talented acts there.
Yep. I saw the Allman Brothers play there. I saw Dylan play there. And it's, to me, that the big stages are cool, but it's the side stages. It's just on a horse track, so you can have these little tents. I would go around and see like Daniel Lanois over at this tent, or you'd see a great blues artist would play, like John Campbell before he passed played there. Just like all these really small artists that were so good. Sonny Landreth would play a side stage, just blow you away on the side. And then the Allman Brothers would play the big stage, or Santana would be on the other side, or it's a great time. And it's, back then it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it went Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it would be like a couple days in a row. You would just go back to this place and then just dive into a full day of music. One of my favorite things at the time was you get like a sheet of the lineup of the day, and we would just sit at the house before with our little marker and just check off, all right, who are we going to see? All right, 11 o'clock, it's Sonny Landreth. Okay, 11:30, we're going to see blues art, just like penciling out our whole day. And you just have 20, plus bands that you're going to see in one day. Really cool time.
I'm looking at the history. Established in 1970 to, and then in 2019, then they missed a couple of years, and then obviously they came back 2022 to the present. Super cool. It's interesting to hear you talk about like liking music that came before your time growing up, because I was kind of the same way, and then musical taste expands and stuff like that, because like growing up for me and being a teen in the mid-90s, late 90s, like I thought of like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and those bands as more classic rock bands, and that was and I think that that band, even though it was sometimes associated with hair metal and even like Van Halen, but particularly Van Halen and Guns N' Roses, I think were two bands that sort of transcended that era and eventually landed in the classic rock. It's all pentatonic scales anyway, but because of, I think, especially Eddie's and musically like Van Halen and I think the songs and the fun element of Guns N' Roses, like there's just so many mega hit songs, Paradise City, Sweet Child of Mine, those songs just transcended, I think that time period as well.
Definitely. Go ahead. I was just saying it was such a pivotal time. I mean, that's pretty much what I focus with my podcast too, is that time period. I don't really cover a lot of new stuff though. I mean, if it's a new like Lucinda Williams, I reviewed her book, her memoir. I mean, so there's artists that are still making music that I will review and talk about their books. But a lot of the stuff is that 60s through 90s is where I usually stay. And it's just amazing how much great stuff is out there. I was blown away when I first started the podcast about a year ago. I was a little concerned, like, can I keep an interest? Is there enough stuff without me having to go backwards and review things that were out for years? And I'm just blown away by the amount of stuff that keeps coming out. And that's what part of my show is. I do this preview thing of like, okay, coming up this month, we've got a new Paul McCartney lyrics book and we got a new James Hetfield from Metallica, and we've got a new Geddy Lee book just come out. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. My calendar, just trying to remember what's coming up, it's amazing how much great stuff is out there.
Yeah, and even speaking to my own point about there are more young artists and great artists coming up in the genres of music that we like. Like there might not be as much material coming out in terms of artists who were, had their prime eras from the 60s to the 90s, but there are artists from the 90s to the present who are in love with those artists as much as we are, who we're going to hear them and hear those influences. So like, there'll be books when you read a book from a young artist, there's going to be so many anecdotes and stories about like growing up listening to Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan and like, you'll like that music, it bridges the gaps from generation to generation, if I may be trite, for lack of a better way to think of expressing it right now.
Yeah, Jeff
That's
Tweedy's
awesome.
got a new book out where he goes through songs that have influenced his life, songs that has a certain meaning to him. I haven't read it yet. I'm just about to get into it. I'm going to feature it in, I think, my February show. But there's a guy that can draw from the past and still go forward and still make great music, modern music now too.
Very cool. I mean, I want to give you the floor to talk about whatever you want to talk about. If you want to go in the chronology of highlights in your musical journey from whenever we left off to the present, if you want to talk about more anything TTB, that's always good. I'm always down for that.
Okay.
I think you said you wanted to talk a little bit about the Leon Russell connection.
Yeah, why don't we jump into that? That was
Derek
very
Susan.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting book. When I was reading it, it's a vast book. It's very deep, and Bill Janovitz, the writer, does a great job. And I learned so much from this book. I mean, Leon was in his teens. His first band was back in Jerry Lee Lewis, the Killer. That was his first band. And in his teens, he joined the Wrecking Crew in Los Angeles, the studio musicians that were famous for iconic hits. And he was the musical director for Phil Spector. So, he's in his early 20s and he's starting to do this stuff. And then he gets hooked up with Delaney and Bonnie. They start coming around. And Leon bought this house in Los Angeles up in the hills. And he just made it a huge recording studio where people would just show up. It was very loose, very 70s, very communal kind of thing. And next thing you know, he's, Clapton's there and George Harrison is there. And J.J. Cale is working for him now. So he's just creating this family of music that as you go through the book and you step back from a TTB standpoint, you're like, wait a minute, these are the little threads that grew into that band. And as it goes along, when it kind of gets to a point where it kind of towards the end of Leon's life, he has that Mad Dog and Englishman reunion. And that Mad Dog stuff was, so important to Susan and Derek. And there's some great quotes from the book. I wanted to share one from you, where they watched the Mad Dogs and Englishmen concert. And they just really love that communal vibe, the mix of R&B and soul. But Derek was quoted as saying that that looks really fun. Our band is loosely based on that concert footage. And I've heard him mention it before, but it's kind of cool to see it in print that he's actually saying, hey, this is where our roots were. This is where we kind of came out of. This was that same kind of feel. And then Mad Dogs was the same kind of setup, the two drums, the horn section, the background vocals, that 10, 11, 12 pieces. Mad Dogs and Englishmen had even more because it was just kind of 70s, and whoever showed up, it could just come on out and play the tambourine or whatever. But you could see that, little seed planted in TTB. And I thought that was really cool. There's a whole chapter in the book dedicated to that reunion of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen that Derek and Susan put together. And there's a point in the book where Susan said it was really cute, and that was her words, to watch Derek and Leon together, working together, because she said, there's two leaders of bands right there, and she really admired how much they both kind of worked together. And Leon let Derek run the show. I mean, Derek went to him and said, hey, how do you want to do this? Because Leon was really, I think, the most famous for putting music together, putting bands together in his arrangements. He arranged all that music of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. He arranged all the music for George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh. I mean, he put all this music together. He arranged 2 songs on Dylan's Greatest Hits Volume 2. So he's known as this arranger. And so Derek goes to him and says, how do you want to arrange the songs for this concert? And Leon told him, it's all yours, man. It's your turn. You do it now. And that was pretty cool. There's another great spot in the book where Derek was talking about watching Susan and Leon interact. And he said Susan and Leon really hit it off because Leon would be playing these old gospel songs and Susan would step up and start singing them. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, how do you know this stuff? And so she was, kind of scold him a little bit like, hey, I know this stuff from way back. I used to do choir back in college, and he said ever since Susan started sharing about her love of gospel music and singing in a gospel choir, they said Leon was hooked, and he liked her from that moment on so much. So it was cool to see all these little threads. Clapton, for instance, Clapton played with Delaney and Bonnie and was a part of that whole scene with Leon. And then, you've got Derek and the Dominoes, and then you have Derek's time with Clapton. So all these, like, I equate in my review of the book, I equate a Leon as being like this big tree stump, and all these branches grew out of Leon and what he was up to. And it touched so many people and so many different musicians. And that's why, I was kind of fascinated with this book, because I learned, wow, this guy was, I think he was the most underrated artist in the 70s. To see the amount of songs that he played on and the amount of people he touched, and then again, having it grow into what I think was TTB was kind of cool.
It's interesting to hear you just describe it. It kind of makes me think of Dwayne and the way he's described it, and the way he's described in various books and stories, as someone who really brought people together for sure. And I was lucky enough to interview Linda Wolf, who did photography on the original Mad Dogs tour. And I'm recalling the way she described Leon as being around him as sort of a prankster who pushed her buttons. But it's funny to think about him as a person and someone who really loved life. Like, that was captured in all of her photographs and in his music too, for sure. But
he was this mystical kind of person that they really kind of bowed down to him a lot. I mean, a lot of people, they called him Maestro. His nickname was the Master of Space and Time. There's a quote in the book of where Derek said the first time he ever saw him, Derek was young. He was in his teens. And he said, this guy walked in. He's like, who the F is this guy? He was blown away by this persona. He's like, oh, and then and someone told him, I think his uncle told him, that's Leon Russell. And Derek said, we always heard Leon Russell's music, so he was always around us in some form. So early on, I think he had a lot to do with the music that formed Derek.
I think that's 100% too. And I think beyond that, even just as a band leader, I think that definitely, if not had a big influence on Derek, you can see the similarities and in terms of just like maybe not the stop space and time and all that stuff, but Derek definitely does have a presence in his own right, and fans will often talk about his Zen-like qualities, and like, it's funny because I remember, I forget who I was talking to about it. I'm like, how come I can't be more like Zen like Derek? Because maybe people are different behind the scenes, and he's not like that 24/7 for sure. But then whoever was talking was like, I'm not like that either. Who is like that? So like, these people do have these interesting, like, when you're that much of a talented artist, there's something, it's their presence. It is different. It's not made up. That's a real thing. Somebody's aura, their energy, what they emit, even when they're not playing music. I mean, you can feel that energy, so to speak. Not to speak too new agey.
No, I totally get it. They have an aura, without a doubt, and especially with Derek, with his upbringing. He talks about it in the book. He said, Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, that was on all the time when he was growing up, and that music was always on. He grew up with that record being such a prominent thing in his life, and to have that upbringing, I think, just plays to what you were talking about, just kind of this confidence, but a friendly confidence, and just this peaceful way about him. And then you see him play with this just fury, but he still holds himself in such a fashion with the way he plays. He's not jumping around. He's not being all crazy. He's very calm with his playing, but his music is just so fiery and so passionate. It's really cool to see where, kind of where some of that came from.
Nothing petty can ever get in the way of the music, and I feel like when it comes to like someone like Leon or Derek, I guess a lot of any of these artists, and I'm speaking generally, but I think something about that quality specifically speaks to like you know, a guy like Derek and Leon,
Absolutely.
and he's still like his influence is still being felt today. Like just
Sure.
thinking of myself and how like just doing this podcast and connecting with you, it like brings me closer to Leon's music and Tedeschi Trucks Band's music, and just even just being someone who's lived in Los Angeles for like 20 years and very familiar with the locations that you're mentioning and
Right.
and some of these places, like to think about how like, oh, Leon was somebody who brought in everybody, you know, was very welcoming to other musicians and wanting to play with these people. And because of that attitude that he had in Los Angeles and connecting with all the people that Linda Wolf described, that,
Right.
you know, when I talked to her and the people that you're talking about, it's like that kind of like led to Tedeschi Trucks Band all these years later. So it's like
Yeah.
all these things kind of come full circle in
Yeah.
an interesting way. And I loved his he produced some Freddie King's, you know,
I think
one
he
of
did.
Freddie King's big albums, Going
Yeah.
Down, and another bit more like he infused, I think, a lot of that influence, a lot of those blues, you know, albums with the rock elements that
Right.
brought something totally fresh to a lot of music. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, like I said, it's mind blowing. I knew a little bit about him, but man, I was schooled after reading this book, and to be a TTB fan and like I said, to kind of follow that thread, you could see where it's kind of leading. And I knew it was leading towards the Lock-In Festival where they did the Mad Dogs Englishmen reunion, and I knew that was coming, but it just was kind of cool to follow those different weaves and different branches and see all those people that meant so much to Leon and to Derek and Susan.
yeah, hopefully the documentary, the Learning to Live Together documentary about the Mad Dogs and the reunion does eventually come out, and
Find
they're
its
able
way
to make
back.
that happen. Because me and you, we were talking about how we were lucky to actually see it during a limited release in theaters. And I think some of those moments that you were describing earlier were in
Yeah.
there, as far as
Yeah.
like Susan singing the gospel,
Uh-huh.
and the moment where Leon is like, "Nah, Derek, I think I'm gonna let you. I'm too old." He's basically saying, "I'm too old for this shit. You do
Right.
it, kid." That's
Exactly.
that's basically what he's saying.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You know, he passed maybe 3 years after. It was pretty close. He didn't live much longer after that time. And he was pretty ill and older at time of that show. You know, he was in his wheelchair and stuff, but you know, it's a great book. I recommend it to anybody who wants not only Leon's story, but like the title says, you know, the journey through rock and roll history. It does just map out a lot of really great moments in rock and roll of this really kind of strange cat, but one of a kind. But we've got a really cool story, and it's a great redemption story too, without giving too much away. You know, he was down and out for a long time, and you know, Derek and Susan played a big part in him
Right.
coming back. You know, that was like where it kind of started, and Elton John kind of took it from there and helped him move along even further towards the end of his life.
It's funny because thinking about the photographs that I remember looking at of him and seeing obviously the movie and the footage and watching him YouTube
Right.
and listening to the music, like he really does have this very like piercing look, this like piercing stare to him,
Right.
and almost like feels like yeah, sure, I'm getting to know him better, but maybe he's getting to know. I feel like he's getting to know me on some level. It's weird because I feel like I could read the I need to do more reading, obviously, but I'll read this book and then I'll feel like, because obviously he was down and out, and I'm sure there's going to be some tough moments, and a lot of that stuff I'm sure is relatable to everyone who's had struggles. So it's almost like he's looking at you in a weird way in some regard. I don't know.
He had a presence, no doubt. And then he had that like father time look towards the end of his life, where that big gray beard and he had top hat, and just he had this look about him. And you know, in the book, there's a lot of times where people were intimidated by him. He was just a different guy. He was from Oklahoma. He wasn't an LA guy, so he was very different. And people were amused and didn't really understand him. And then he started playing, and he was playing things. I guess I don't know piano that well, but they said he played piano in a different way. They'd never heard anybody play piano before. and you know, his piano's littered all across so many songs, and you can almost, when you know now, you can hear it and you'd be like, oh, that's Leon right there. You can hear his playing.
Yeah, good stuff all around. What else should we cover?
I don't know, man. We covered a lot of ground there. We went places that I didn't even think we were going to go, but I'm glad we did. You know, I'll talk Dylan all day long, so that was fun, and I think that was a great conversation about Leon and being able to share about this book, because it's a cool story.
Yeah, show me the book one more time.
Leon Russell, The Master of Space and Time: Journey Through Rock and Roll History. Bill Janovitz. He wrote a great Stones book too. This Rocks Off book. He's a really good writer. Yep.
Do you
highly recommend that one?
Have you written any what's your have you ever
writing?
Dabbled? No,
never written anything. But I wrote that blog there for this San Diego music scene, and I write all my my script for my podcast. So I usually do about 15, 20 minutes where I feature one title, and then I'll come back and go through about 5 or 6 others that are coming out that I'll see. I'll usually do a review of probably 3 of them. You know, there's a main review that's that one spotlight title, as I like to call it. But then I'll review 2 or 3, because I'll usually digest a couple books and a couple documentaries a month, because there's just, like I said, so much good stuff out there.
Yeah, but I feel like it's mostly good stuff, and you don't have to name names, but I'm just thinking, like, to be a little negative. It's like, what would be an example of a book that you might not be the best, or a documentary? What is it missing? Is it missing a narrative? Is it missing personal information? Is it missing? It's not enough about the music. Where do certain books or docs go wrong in your mind?
All right, so there's only been a couple this year that I didn't really care for, and one was a shocker. And I waited for it to come out, and I was fired up because it was one of my favorite artists, Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's Jimmy and Stevie Ray Vaughan, Brothers in Blues, a documentary that was made, and it is lacking. The rights. First off, they didn't have any rights to the music, and that's tough not to hear Stevie Ray play. And they didn't have a lot of rights to, believe it or not, even though it's about mainly, Jimmy telling his story, which was cool. The light that they portrayed him in was, I didn't care for it. They pushed him. I don't know. They tried to make him look like a real cool guy, and they showed him, driving around town in his car, and he's talking about
You're talking about Jimmy's telling Stevie Ray's story.
Jimmy's telling their story, Brothers in Blues. So he's telling, like, how they grew up and how.
Well, he's telling both of their stories.
Both of them, yeah. And they were just positioning Jimmy. I just didn't like the way they were just positioning Jimmy. They sat him down in front of, like, his Grammys behind him. It was just like that same old trope, that same old thing. It's like, give me something different. It's Jimmy and it's Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother telling the story of them growing up and their history. That's a really cool story, and there was cool moments in that. But without the music, and again, without like more artifacts and photos, I was bothered by the fact that they use the same photo over and over again. To me, that's a sign of, like, it's not a quality product when you show me Stevie Ray Vaughan, the same photo 4 times in the documentary. Come on, it just felt a little rushed, and it didn't hit me the way I was fired up about that one. I couldn't wait to see that one, and that one let me down. And I hate to talk bad about Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's what I said in my podcast. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm going to give this.
Well, you're not talking bad about him.
I know, but it still hurts. It still hurts to talk, to be anything negative towards.
You're actually giving very constructive criticism, in my opinion, because I'm sure the creators would want to do Stevie Ray and his brother justice, honestly. For sure.
That one didn't work. And for a book, I would say another band that I really like is Cheap Trick. I can't remember the artist off the top of my head. It was one of the earlier books I reviewed. It's called This Band Has No Past. Really cool book, but way too much detail, which is interesting. You want to learn, like, this book here is 600 pages, this Leon Russell book. You got to be committed to go through 600 pages, but the Cheap Trick book was too much in regards to, like, okay, the band, this history saying the author was talking about on Tuesday night they played this club, on Wednesday night they played this club, on Thursday night they played this club, on Friday night. Okay, I get it. You're going to show me a little bit about it, but it kept going and kept going, and it was just too much for not only a casual fan. I think you had to be you know what I thought about? I thought if I was a Dylan fan, which I'm a huge Dylan fan, and I was reading this book, would this be too much information? And my answer was yes. And that's saying a lot.
Right, because I had the same thought with thinking about TTB. I'm like, I would love a TTB book. Tell me where you're at Tuesday, Wednesday.
Right.
But like, yeah, I say that, but like maybe when I'm actually reading, it's like, tell me a story. No, don't necessarily just historical facts.
Yeah. So unfortunately, those two this last year were ones that didn't hit for me. I'm get fired up about it. I'm positive about it. So there's a lot of great stuff that I fell into this last year.
Yeah, and just on a positive note, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to give you some positive stuff, definitely some good positive recommendations, because that's what I like to be. I like to recommend stuff. That's how the podcast started, actually, is my friends were like, dude, what's a good documentary to see, or what's a good book about Springsteen to read, or I was always throwing these recommendations, like, why don't you do a podcast and talk about recommending stuff? And I'm like, all right, that sounds cool. And I just jumped right in and love it. So that's what I want to be, that go-to, where do you go to find a good recommendation? And there's tons of them that came out this last year. I'm about to do my year-end show, so I'm not going to give you my number one book or documentary, but I'll give you like a roundabout. So the best book to me of the last year are a couple of them. One is Deliver Me From Nowhere, the story of Springsteen's making of Nebraska by Warren Zanes. That is a powerful, haunting story that hasn't been told like this yet. I don't know if you're familiar with Warren Zanes' writing. He wrote the Tom Petty biography. Really great writer. And this story I just can't believe it hasn't been told before, about the making of that Nebraska record. And it's a very strange record. Springsteen actually claims it was his best record they ever made. And I remember when he said that, I'm like, better than Born to Run? Better than Darkness? Better than The River? And he, that's a marker for him. And he made that in a little house in New Jersey on a cassette tape on a boombox. Just him, he had his little recording equipment set up next to his bed, and he would wake up in the morning and just play these weird songs. That's a really, really cool book, Deliver Me From Nowhere. That was one of my favorites. And the Lucinda Williams memoir is one of the best memoirs I've read in a long time. Really, really honest, personal. It felt like sitting down with Lucinda and just having a conversation on her porch in New Orleans, just sitting there, and she's very raw. She's very open, kind of like her lyrics. It was like being inside a Lucinda Williams song. Great memoir. Something about secrets. I can't remember the title off the top of my head. Oh man, can't remember that. And I'll give you another documentary that I really like that I would say is a must see, and that is I Am Everything, the Little Richard story. Have you seen that one?
I haven't, but I'm a fan.
Oh, great documentary. You got to see this. Really, this is one of the best documentaries of the last year, put together with such class and such reverence. It's such a great story about Little Richard, this amazing character, and talk about someone who was underrated. I mean, that guy just never got his due. He always missed his moment so many times in his life. It was like, here's this moment, and something would happen. He just couldn't get that moment that he wanted for a lot of personal reasons, a lot of religious reasons, a lot of sexual reasons. He just had sex, drugs, and rock and roll, just threw him all over the place. He just couldn't straighten that out in his life. But man, that guy he's the originator to me. He's the one that everybody came after, James Brown and Prince and Harry Styles and whoever you want to be. I always said if Little Richard came on the scene now, he would be huge. He would blow everybody away. If you saw that nowadays as like this, new artist, Little Richard, people would freak out.
Right. And I mean, I'm just thinking on like social media alone, like,
yeah, he would be a huge star. He would be huge. That's a great, great documentary. I Am Everything, the Little Richard story. A lot of scholars, a lot of artists are in there talking about him. Really really well done, like just like A+ stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I don't know too much about him because I guess I didn't think about as somebody who never got their moment. 'Cause I think of him as like a legend, I guess. Obviously, maybe not on I guess I guess James Brown and Michael Jackson that like sort of exceeded him,
And
but he was
Prince, yeah.
right. But he was just as much an innovator as all of those guys.
Yeah, you watch this and you'll be like, okay, I can see where all these guys got this from. It came from Little Richard.
Where did he get it from? I've looked it up before, his influence.
Yeah,
Like,
he
forget
was
off the top of my head.
his parents. I think his mother was a performer, and he would perform in like almost circus kind of atmospheres when he was young, and doing music and seeing like preachers and stuff.
I was gonna
From the
guess that.
church, and that's where he kind of got that kind of crazy playing of the keys, and even Jerry Lee Lewis a little bit was, they were influencing each other at that time. But man, he was right there in the beginning of rock and roll. I think he's the one who started rock and roll personally.
Well, to maybe bring this full circle, you used the word circus, and I think that's one of the words that Derek and or Susan used to describe what they saw when they watched the Mad Dogs documentary, and it's definitely a word that they've used to describe their own band, usually hyphenated with something else. We're a circus band, circus family, something along those lines. But thank you for your time and the stories. It's good to connect. Have to get you on again sometime, maybe to we can discuss topics, or if you're going to shows, or more recaps, something related to all this great music, and so much of it does connect to TTB, and it's cool for me to discover new music and just like dig deeper on it. It does make the listening experience that much richer, connecting with other people who love all this music too and have knowledge about it and share it with me. That's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate it, man. You got me all fired up. You talking about Dylan. I'm talking about my books and my documentaries. I'll keep going on that stuff. So it's been a great conversation. It's great to be on the show again. I can't thank you enough for what you're doing for the band and the fans, and delivering this material, all these reviews of these shows. I tune in all the time just to see what's going on with the band. So great stuff, man. Thanks again.
Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it. I'm going to let you go in a second. You don't have to leave it. We'll just end the podcast recording part of it. But why don't you tell people where they could find and follow you?
Sure. Again, my podcast is called the Rock Talk Studio. Anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. First Tuesday of every month is a new show. It features a spotlight title, either a book or a documentary. And then again, I've got about 4 or 5 other recommendations in there. That's really what I'm up to, is just recommending rock and roll books and documentaries. Rock Talk Studio. Very cool. Nice again, Rick. Talk soon. All right. Thanks. Peace. So there you go. Episode 136 with Rick, Rock Talk Studio. That was so much fun. I really appreciate Rick's time again. Another person in my life that I could pretty much talk music all day with, I'm pretty sure. We'll definitely have to have Rick back on again soon if he's down, and hopefully I'll see him at a West Coast TTB show in 2024. We are looking out for those dates, hoping to get those for sure. Anyway, I hope everyone is doing okay out there. Please check out at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, iTunes, Spotify, blah 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 blah. Again, positive reviews on Apple Podcasts are greatly appreciated. Of course, as always, subscribe on YouTube. I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram and Twitter, adamchoit.com, Tedeschi Trucks Podcast.com for my stuff and this podcast stuff, respectively. Tedeschi Trucks Band.com is their official website. Buy tickets to shows, buy the merch, join the Swamp Family Club, download the app, all that stuff. Definitely want to download that app. So much good stuff on there. I think that's pretty much all I got today. Going to try to cook up some more stuff as the year comes to a close. And look forward to a great 2024. But thank you again, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Rick. Thank you to TTB fans, supporters of this podcast. Again, TTB themselves, the band, the crew, everybody involved and who loves this band. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
But I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening, and let's talk soon. Peace.